السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين من تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So inshallah, this is our last session for a journey to the hereafter, and more specifically a description of Jannah. So alhamdulillah, we went through all the categories, and the last thing we had discussed, if I remember correctly, is talking about the wishes in Jannah, when people have wishes in Jannah. We're talking about those who had wished that they want to plant something, those who had wished, like when they look at a bird that's flying, because they desire to eat it, what happens to it, and stuff like that. And so the following section is talking about the women in Jannah, or generally speaking, Nisa Ahl Jannah, which is the women in Jannah. And it discusses several aspects. Of course, the first aspect of it is discussing the wives of the believers, right? Those who are actually, generally speaking, Muslim women, because they fall into categories. They either are, they're married and they had died before, for example, their husbands, or they died after their husbands but they get married again, or they had, they were widows and then they got married again, or they were divorced and got married again, or they never got married in the first place. So all these are things that are usually kind of addressed. What happens in the judgment is because it's part of na'im, part of the pleasure of enjoyment in the hereafter, is that we're not secluded, we're not by ourselves, but rather part of the desires we can fulfill in enjoyment is to have our spouses with us. And if we do not have a spouse, to get a spouse. And so this is usually discussed over here. And so this first section, part of it, in Nisa Ahl Jannah, the women of the people or the inhabitants of Jannah, is talking about the wife, the Muslim woman, her husband is a Muslim, and of course both of them enter Jannah, provided that both of them enter Jannah, because one can enter Jannah, one cannot. In the case, for example, of Asiya and Fir'aun. Asiya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote it in the Quran, ضرب الله مثلا الذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون. She's a beautiful example for those who are believers, the wife of Fir'aun. On the other hand, we know obviously Fir'aun is not in Jannah, he's in the hellfire. And so we're talking about here now more of a situation of a woman who, her husband is a Muslim, and they both, inshallah, enter Jannah. What happens to them is that if one of them enters Jannah, actually when both enter Jannah, they'll be together. So they'll be married back again, together. So إذا دخل المؤمن الجنة, if a person enters Jannah, if the wife is pious and the husband is also pious, then he would become, or he would be her husband in Jannah. And we know this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned that we have couples, married couples in Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, جَنَّاتُ عَدْنٍ يَدْخُلُونَهَا وَمَنْ صَلَحَ مِنْ آبَائِهِمْ وَأَزْوَاجِهِمْ وَذُرِّيَّاتِهِمْ. And so Jannat Adn, Jannat, which is obviously Jannah, Adn, essentially everlasting, remaining. يَدْخُلُونَهَا, they will enter it. Who will enter it? مَنْ صَلَحَ مِنْ آبَائِهِمْ, who is pious or who is good from their fathers, وَأَزْوَاجِهِمْ, their spouses, وَذُرِّيَّاتِهِمْ, and their children. So they will all enter Jannah together, will be with each other. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُمْ وَأَزْوَاجُهُمْ فِي ظُلَالٍ عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ مُتَّكِئُونَ. Them and their spouses, فِي ظِلَالٍ, in shades, عَلَى الْأَرَائِكِ, on the couches reclining. So over here it's azwaj again. Now what if a woman had multiple husbands, which means either they have died or she got divorced but then she got married again? A bit of a conundrum, right? Or a bit of a... So that is one of the opinions. What if your last one is not that great?
The best one.
See, now you want the best one, right? So there are three opinions regarding this matter between the scholars. So this, once again, is a situation, a woman who had married more than one man. Not at the same time, of course, but either she got divorced and she got remarried, or she was a widow and then she got remarried. And so there's three opinions. The first one is that she will be with the one who is the best of manners, who was the best, who treated her the best in this world. Put it this way. Okay, who treated her the best in this world. كَانْ أَحْسَنَ خُلُقًا, أحسنهم خُلُقًا, right? The best of manners and behaviors with her in this world. The second opinion is that she is given a choice to pick. تُخَيَّرُ بَيْنَهُمْ. She has an option to pick which one is it. I prefer to be with A or B or C. And the last opinion is that she is, and that you have mentioned over here, she is with the one that she had married last. Many of the scholars, or many of the evidences, I know many of the scholars, they kind of adopted the last opinion because this is why it's prevalent. And it has different transmissions. Actually, all of them have some sort of evidence one way or another. There's obviously a debate on the weakness and the strength. But the third opinion, many of the scholars support, is that she is with the last husband because of some of the narrations that are not extremely weak. They're kind of, could be good standing, some of the actions of the Sahaba. But one of them, for example, is that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he wanted to marry al-Darda. He proposed to her, and she refused to marry him. She refused to marry anybody else after Abu Darda. And she said that I heard Abu Darda say that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mar'a fi akhiri azwajiha," right? That the woman is with her last of her husbands. أو قال لآخر أزواجها, she is for her last of her husbands. Now this narration is not narrated in the 6 books of hadith or Musnad Imam Ahmed or Imam Malik. It's narrated in other books, and so there's a dispute of its authenticity. Some say it's authentic, some say it's a bit weak, some say it can be elevated to a stronger level, but it's based on that and then a couple other evidences. And now some of the Sahaba understood that she would be with the one with the most preference. Okay. Wallahu alam. But those are the 3 opinions that are there. Now obviously there's a Hur al-Ain, but this becomes a bit of a touchy subject sometimes. But we have to acknowledge there is Hur al-Ain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had placed in Jannah. There is a dispute about the numbers, but the least is that there is 2 Hur al-Ain, right? And then it goes into debate, which is better. Many of the scholars adopt that the worldly women are much better than the Hur al-Ain in their judgment. But in the end, there is going to be no issues, no dispute, no jealousies, no animosities, or anything like that. But this is the reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept for the believers. Allah. Now obviously when you go into the Hur al-Ain, the discussion, there are there's singing, that the believers enjoy the singing and the beautiful voices and the singing of Hur al-Ain and all these other details. Right, now one of the things that usually discussed is one of the enjoyments obviously in Ahl Jannah, or when we talk about Ahl Jannah, is mentioned in the Quran. Sometimes some of the discussions that happen between them, the laughters and the discussions that happen, and reminiscing about the old days and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon them. And so, for example, one of the discussions that happens is between the people of Jannah and the people of the hellfire. A discussion that goes on after each one enters. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَادَى أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ أَصْحَابَ النَّارِ أَنْ قَدْ وَجَدْنَا مَا وَعَدَنَا رَبُّنَا حَقًّا. So the people of the Jannah, وَنَادَى أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ, the people, inhabitants of Jannah, they called to the people, inhabitants of the hellfire, and they would say, we had found وَجَدْنَا مَا وَعَدَنَا رَبُّنَا حَقًّا. We truly have found what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us in reality. فَهَلْ وَجَدْتُمْ مَا وَعَدَ رَبُّكُمْ حَقًّا. Did you find what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised you, or has promised, did you find it in reality and in truth? قَالُوا نَعَمْ. They said yes. فَأَذَّنَ مُؤَذِّنٌ بَيْنَهُمْ. A caller between them has called out, اللعنة الله على الظالمين. Right, that the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is upon those who are the transgressors. And so this is one of, for example, the side discussions that happen. Another one is one of the famous ones, usually in Surah As-Saffat, when the individuals, the believers in Jannah, they would discuss sometimes that they had friends that would call them to bad things, and that they did not, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did not obey them. They were steadfast, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had gave them Jannah, so they praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this. And so this in Surah As-Saffat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَقْبَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ إِنِّي كَانَ لِي قَرِينٌ. So وَأَقْبَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, which means and they approach one another, right? يَتَسَاءَلُونَ, which means inquiring each other, like they're talking, inquiring with each other. And so قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ, one of them would say, a speaker among them will say, إِنِّي كَانَ لِي قَرِينٌ, I used to have a companion, قَرِين, which is a companion person who's with him. يَقُولُ أَإِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُصَدِّقِينَ. This Qareen with him, his friend, will ask him, it says, like, are you indeed of those who believe, meaning in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hereafter and so forth. So are you among those who believe, أَإِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا وَعِظَامًا أَإِنَّنَا مَدِينُونَ, that when we have died and become dust, we will indeed be recompensed, we'll be judged and rewarded. And so he will say this, and then he will tell them, قَالَ هَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُطَّلِعُونَ, let's look, where is he, right? هَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُطَّلِعُونَ, and then he will say, would you care to look? Let's search for him. Where is he? Where is this Qareen? فَاطَّلَعَ فَرَآهُ فِي سَوَاءِ الْجَحِيمِ, and so he looked and he found him in the midst of the hellfire, سَوَاءِ الْجَحِيمِ. And so he would say, قَالَ تَاللَّهِ إِن كِدْتَ لَتُرْدِينَ, Oh Allah, by Allah, you almost ruined me. Because his friend is saying, what are you, a believer? He's trying to drag him. So he's saying, Wallah, you almost ruined me. وَلَوْلَا نِعْمَةُ رَبِّي لَكُنْتُ مِنَ الْمُحْضَرِينَ. And if it wasn't for the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon me, I would have been of those who are brought in hell, muhdarin, that are present in the hellfire. أَفَمَا نَحْنُ بِمَيِّتِينَ. Are we not going to, then he will say, are we not going to die? إِلَّا مَوْتَتَنَا الْأُولَى, except our first death. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمُعَذَّبِينَ, and we will not be punished. And so this is like a istijab. إِنَّ هَذَا لَهُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Verily this is the great attainment, right? The great reward, the great fawz. And so this is, for example, some of the discussions they would have in Jannah. Other discussions would include إِنَّا كُنَّا مِن قَبْلُ نَدْعُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْبَرُّ الرَّحِيمُ, right? We used to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us. He's the most merciful. And so these are discussions and chats that happen in Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those in Jannah. Alright, now somebody asked before, is there active worship? I can't remember, they're not here. One of them. Yeah, Nas. And I answered her, and so part of the section that's discussed usually in Ahl Jannah is what would they say. So this is a talk between of them, but will they be praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And I guess the people ask that, is there acts of worship, because it kind of sometimes is confusing. Because remember, in the hereafter, it's an abode of reward, not taklif. Taklif, which means liability, responsibility, action. That it's mandatory for you to do something. In Jannah, it's not like that. Right? It's more of a reward and enjoyment. And so, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about people in Jannah, and He says, يُسَبِّحُونَ اللَّهَ بُكْرَةً وَعَشِيًّا. They praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say subhanallah when bukra wa ashiyya, in the morning and in the evening. And this is the description of the people who enter Jannah. So they're actually, there's obviously things we think of actions of worship that is being performed, whether it's from tasbih or something like that. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he had mentioned, he said, يُلْهَمُونَ tasbih, right? So this is ilham, they're kind of, it's almost as if they're breathing. So يُلْهَمُونَ التَّسْبِيحَ وَالتَّكْبِيرَ كَمَا تُلْهَمُونَ النَّفْسِ. So it's inspired for them to do tasbih and to do takbir, similar to how you are inspired to breathe. It doesn't take us effort to breathe, it's like just unconsciously we're doing it. And so for them, tasbih and takbir is like that. However, this is not something that is considered ilzam, which means that it's obligatory for you to do it, but rather perhaps we should think about it.
Nourishment of the soul.
Sorry?
Nourishment for the soul.
Not just nourishment, but it's because perhaps as their heart has been illuminated by by knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Has illuminated by knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and has been filled with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whoever loves something, right, increases from remembering it. Think about it. Whenever you are enjoying something, you're loving something, whether it's a sport or something you're into at that time, you can't stop talking about it. Does it take effort? Is it mandatory? No, it's just subhanAllah, that inclination, that desire, that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the praising of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wanting to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all His bounties that He has bestowed. This is the behavior, right, of the believers in the Day of Judgment, right? Wallahu a'lam. And of course it's tightly associated, because goes into the next section of the ultimate reward that we are receiving. And many of the scholars kind of dispute which is more ultimate, but there's two ultimate rewards that we are given on the Day of Judgment. And this is beautifully captured in two separate hadiths, wallahu a'lam. And so this is both in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. When Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, says that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى يَقُولُ لِأَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the people of Ahl al-Jannah, He calls them, He says, Ya Ahl al-Jannah, O people of inhabitants of Jannah. فَيَقُولُونَ لَبَّيْكَ رَبَّنَا وَسَعْدَيْكَ. So they say, oh, we continue to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and indulge in your happiness, right? لَبَّيْكَ وَسَعْدَيْكَ. We'll do whatever, your happiness. وَالْخَيْرُ كُلُّهُ فِي يَدَيْكَ. And all goodness is in your hand. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will address them, He will tell them, هَلْ رَضِيتُ. I mean, imagine this conversation between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the people of Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask the people of Jannah, He says, هَلْ رَضِيتُمْ. Are you pleased? Are you happy? And so they will say, وَمَا لَنَا لَا نَرْضَى. Right? Ya Rabb, why would not be pleased? وَقَدْ أَعْطَيْتَنَا. And you had given us, وَلَمْ تُعْطَ أَحَدًا مِنْ خَلْقٍ. And you did not give other people. Because each inhabitant in Jannah thinks that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him something that was not parallel to anybody else. Even the person who has the least will think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him what He has not given anybody else. And so they will say, you have given us and you haven't given anybody else. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell them, هَلَا أُعْطِيكُمْ أَفْضَلَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Right? أَلَا أُعْطِيكُمْ أَفْضَلَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Should I not give you something better than this? And so they say, Oh Allah, Ya Rabb, وَأَيُّ شَيْءٍ أَفْضَلَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. What is better than that? I want you to think about it. You're in Jannah. All the blessings that you have, it becomes very natural. You say, well, what is better than this? What is? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُحِلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ رَضْوَانِي وَلَا أَسْخَطُ عَلَيْكُمْ بَعْدَهُ أَبَدًا. That I bestow that I am, how should I translate this? أُحِلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ رَضْوَانِي. That me being pleased, right, be bestowed upon you. That means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say that I will be pleased, right, with you. فَلَا أَسْخَطْ عَلَيْكُمْ بَعْدَهُ أَبَدًا. That I would never be أسخط, which means upset or mad or angry with you ever again. Which means now that you are constantly, right, feeling that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with you. That He is subhanahu wa ta'ala pleased with you all the time. Because you have to remember, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most generous. We try so much in this world to do everything that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards us in the hereafter for always being pleased with us, right? Until the Jannah lasts, which is alhamdulillah forever, eternity. And then He would never be angry with us again. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adds to that, and this is mentioned in the Quran, right, of another pleasure that's even there. And in fact, He deprived the disbelievers from it. He gave it specifically for the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. Faces that are illuminated and bright and happy, إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا, towards its Lord, it is looking. And on the contrast, when He was talking about the disbelievers, in another verse, when He says, كَلَّا إِنَّهُمْ عَنْ رَبِّهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَمَحْجُوبُونَ. Nay, which means, no, إِنَّهُمْ, verily they are, عَنْ رَبِّهِمْ, they are, they are, عَنْ رَبِّهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَمَحْجُوبُونَ. On that day they will be veiled. Thank you, I was looking for veiled from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means they will not be seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a form of punishment. And Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he narrates that Suhaib al-Rumi, he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا دَخْلَ أَهْلُ الْجَنَّةِ الْجَنَّةِ. If the people inhabitants of Jannah enter Jannah, يَقُولُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تُرِيدُونَ شَيْءٍ أَزِيدُكُمْ. Do you want something more? I would give you. And so they would say, what is there to give us to more? أَلَمْ تُغَيِّدْ وُجُوهَنَا. Didn't you brighten our faces? أَلَمْ تُدْخِلْنَا الْجَنَّةِ. Didn't you allow us to enter Jannah? وَتُنَجِّنَا مِنَ النَّارِ. And you saved us from the hellfire. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet says, فَيَكْشِفُ الْحِجَابِ. Right? Hijab is the barrier, will be removed. فَمَا أُعْطُوا شَيْئًا أَحَبَّ إِلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّظَرِ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. They're not given anything that is more beloved to them than looking upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is, the Prophet then he recited, لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا الْحُسْنَى وَزِيَادَةً. to those who have done ihsan, ahsanu, perfected, did excellence, did good, al-husna, there is excellence, and beyond, waziyad. Right? There's good and there's extra. And so this is, like, the two types of pleasures that are in the end the most pleasures, but obviously looking upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that kind of trumps all the other pleasures and enjoyments you have in Jannah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to never deprive us from this. Ameen. Alright, so, and I'm going to end with this, I guess. Actually, I shouldn't end with this. I'm going to end with two things. One is trying to address a bit of a misconception. And is it talking about whether attaining the pleasures of the hereafter necessitates that we leave the pleasures of this world. Right? Because this is a bit of a misconception that people think, and I guess it's a bit of a misconception because it's this idea about religion is restrictive, and this whole idea of a stereotype that a person who abides by Islam and practices it is always a person who is sad, a person who's always kind of like, not smiling, like, abus. Abus, frowning, a person who's frowning and was yelling and yelling at people and giving them hell cards. You're gonna go hell admission cards and stuff like that. It's a bit of a misconception, right? People might have this image is that for you to enter Jannah, you have to, not enjoy anything but this world. This is not true. So the world in itself is a creation. Okay. It is not looked down upon, or it's not considered something that is bad, unless it distracts you from the hereafter. Because how do we attain the hereafter? We need to utilize this world to attain the hereafter. So if it's a cause of distraction, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this entire world for us. وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ right? ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء فسواهن سبع سماوات right? الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا, he is the one that created, for you this with everything in the world, which means for your utility, for your utilization, right? You need it to live and survive, but also as a tool and means to get to the hereafter. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this, it tells us that this is a tool that can be utilized, right? Sure, I guess if anybody wants coffee or anything else, we have some coffee. Now, however, if the person, uses this world as a means, as a gateway to achieve or attain the hereafter, then it's not something like people will think. And it's all about intentions. Why do you go to work? Why are you spending your money? Why are you buying the house? Okay. Is it to shelter, myself, to fulfill my obligation? Then this is a reward. To provide a safe haven for my family, then it becomes a reward. Why do I go to the grocery store? Things that can be considered a habit can all of a sudden turn into acts of worship. I'm going to the grocery store to kind of as a form of obligations to feed my family, then it becomes a sadaqah. Okay. And so this, using it as a means. However, if this world is going to distract you from the hereafter, then this is when it's kind of looked down upon. We should think of things such as, for example, Sulaiman alayhi salam, Uthman ibn Affan. All these individuals who actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed with riches, what did they use it for? For the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They used their wealth for serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what it is. And so it's not necessary to attain the hereafter that you do not enjoy the world. وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. Do not forget your share of this world and do good or do excellence similar to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given his favors upon you, for example. And so this is one kind of aspect, just kind of clear the misconception. Now the last thing that actually never mind, I shouldn't say the last thing.
If it's what, then fire?
Yeah, it's not just the hellfire. No, I'm going to talk about the last, usually with the وآخر دعواهم, right? And alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And so after this is we're talking about after the believers have went through the tribulations of the Day of Judgment, the different stages, the different stations, the mizan, crossing the sirat, the settlement of the disputes between the believers, and then they enter Jannah and the pleasure of the Jannah. They're alhamdulillah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves away sadness from their heart. And so they see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided, has prepared for them from pleasures and bounties. And so they, once that happens, obviously their tongues will move in praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and doing tasbih and taqdees to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He had removed sadness from them, and that He had fulfilled His promise to them, and given them Jannah. And so their last calling, وَآخِرَ دَعْوَاهُمْ فِي الْجَنَّةِ and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. And so this is from the Quran, obviously. وَدَعْوَاهُمْ فِيهَا, their da'wah in it, their call in it. سُبْحَانَكَ اللَّهُمَّ وَتَحِيَّتُهُم فِيهَا salam, right? And their greetings is salam. وَآخِرُ دَعْوَاهُمْ, and their last call is an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that once the inhabitants of Jannah are going to Jannah, and the people in the hellfire and the hellfire, there's an interesting conversation that's going to happen, or disputes, or complaints between Jannah and the hellfire. They're both going to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jannah is going to be complaining, and the hellfire is going to be complaining. We obviously know what the hellfire is going to be complaining about. What's he going to be complaining about?
To remove the punishment or lighten the punishment.
No, the hellfire it's not complaining about that. I'm talking about the hellfire itself, not the inhabitants. I'm talking about the hellfire as a creation itself. Will have a complaint. Will be complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Ask for more.
No, it will not. Yes, it will call for more, but it's not complaining about that. It wants more. And it's not going to stop until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And I'm going to mention that I hate translating it, because when you translate it, you're explaining it and it kind of goes into a bit of a dispute. But حتى يضع الله تبارك وتعالى رجله فتقول قط قط, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places His rijl, right? And I'm not going to translate it, because then you go into a bit of an issues, right? Rijl, right? In some narrations, qadamahu. Now, if you translate it as foot, then it's a problem right there, right? So you leave it as it is. Terminology is we don't translate stuff like that, because it has aspects of anthropomorphism, and that's not the case. It's not meant by it. Wallahu a'lam. حتى يضع الله تبارك وتعالى رجله فتقول قد قد, until it says stop, because it becomes crushed and it kind of crumbled, and so it becomes full then. But no, that's not the complaint. The complaint is something else. The hellfire is going to complain that I have been uthirt, which means preferred, right? So I have been preferred بالمتكبرين والمتجبرين, with those who are arrogant and oppressors, I guess, right? Kind of mutajabbar, jabbar comes from jabbar, a person who kind of thinks that he has might and oppression to some extent. Mutakabbirin, those are arrogant. So it's complaining that I have been favored and given maybe the worst of people. Right? That's the complaint of the hellfire. Now Jannah, what's it going to complain about?
Jannah doesn't want more?
No, Jannah doesn't want more either. It's complaining and saying, Mali, why is it, La yadkhuluni, those who enter me are those, no one enters me except إلا ضعفاء الناس وسقطهم. What is it that the weak are the ones that enter me, and the saqatim, the ones who are looked down upon, right? The ones who are considered of the lowly of classes. Now, of course, low of classes they're not low in class in terms of the eyesight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is referring to how they were looked upon in this world. Now, is it true that only the people who are less fortunate, the weak, are the ones that enter Jannah?
Most of them.
No, that's not the case. But I guess the term that's being used is as a majority, right? obviously there are kings that will enter Jannah, there are pious, there are people who are rich, they'll enter Jannah and all these things. But we're talking about a majority over here, right? Many people who are weak, that have been oppressed, that have been looked down upon in society, even looked down upon in terms of it's kind of funny practice, because people of high class, at least in Muslim countries we see that, right? The people of high class, they look down upon other people who are high class, but they're religious. They consider it something that is for the commoners.
Yes.
It's kind of so weird, right? Like, oh, she's wearing the hijab, right? Like, what is this? Like, it's not classy. And so even to that point, it's kind of odd. But people who are considered insignificant or lowly in the eyesight of individuals. And so it's going to complain.
Or humble people.
Or people who are humble, but they, once again, they're kind of looked down upon. They're not considered
If you're
significant.
rich and you're humble, then you are considered like weak.
Well, compared to when other people of your same class look at you, yeah, they might have that thought. That's true. So this is the complaint that they have. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Anti rahmati, talking to Jannah, you are my mercy. Arhamu biki ma asha min ibadi. I bestow mercy upon whom I choose from my slaves. And he tells her the hellfire, إنما أنت, you are my punishment. عذابي وأعذب بك من أشاء من عبادي. I punish with you whom I will from my slaves. وَلِكُلِّ وَاحِدَةٍ مِّنْهُمَا مِلْؤُهَا. And to each one of you is their fill, which means that each will be filled. Okay? Each will be filled of the inhabitants of the hellfire or the inhabitants of the Jannah. Wallahu a'lam. And so this is kind of the interesting dispute we have. And by this, we kind of conclude the session of A Journey to the Hereafter. And I think, we had 15 classes or 18 classes. But I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it beneficial, inshallah, and to make us among those who enter Jannah, and have a Jannah, and to enjoy the pleasure of drinking from the hand of the Prophet ﷺ from the Kawthar, and to be among those who are bestowed with the mercy and blessings to look upon the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be with the messengers in the highest levels and for those al-A'la, with our children and our families, look on our fathers and the prophets.